I'm missing one, Josh. Oh, here it is. I'm bringing it.
I knew you wanted one. You would die if you didn't have it. But you know, that's the feedback I've gotten over the years when I always asking a student, what can I do to help? You know, well, we need more quizzes. Then you give them, oh my God, you give us so many quizzes.
I think I actually read that like in a review for the last class.
Yeah. More homework, more quizzes. It does help. The more you engage with it, the more you do it, the more it helps, I think. All right, take out chapter 16, and that's going to be it for this week. We will have covered 4 chapters in 2 days. That's pretty good, right? And I remember I told you that would happen some in the latter half of the class. Before I forget, for next week, you've got your quiz. You've got the 2 homework worksheets here. Please, please, please make sure you watch videos, and I'll try to remember to send you links on chapters 14 and 15, because we will be in finance next week, and finance is heavy duty stuff. I mean, you hear the sigh over here from somebody who's been through it before. Finance chapters are not fun. That's just a lot of material. It's a lot to absorb. You don't need to be hearing it for the first time when you come in here next week. You need to have kind of an idea in advance about a lot of these things so that you can kind of turn them over in your head ahead of time. You really, really need to do yourself a huge favor and watch the chapter 14 and 15 videos ahead of next week so that you are prepared. Make sure you got your calculator with you, because there'll be a ton of math next week. I mean, a ton. And it will take us all day, Monday and Tuesday, to get through finance. We may not even finish 14 and 15 next week. So, we do 4 chapters this week, and next week we may not finish 2. It's just kind of the way it goes in this class. I will tell you that the next 2 weeks probably account for not maybe more than half of the math on the whole test. The next 2 weeks will cover at least half of the math on the test, if not more than half, maybe 2/3 of the math on the whole exam will be covered over the next 2 weeks between the finance chapters and the valuation chapters. So chapters 14, 15, and 17, right in a row. And that's why I said they're right in a row, because look, we're doing 16 right now. So we've done up through 13. We're getting ready to knock out 16, so at least 14, 15, 17, back to back to back. And that's where the math is. Those are the math-heavy chapters. All right? So here's a breather with no math for you. I'll give you some. Chapter 16 is basic residential construction. I should let Bud teach this section, and I can sit down.
I don't know what that about.
This chapter, I think, is sort of a funny throw-in in the book, because it doesn't teach you enough to actually make you useful about anything to do with construction. So I think it's kind of useless. I actually think this is a really useful topic. I think if you're selling houses, you should have some idea of how they're built. But I think the kinds of things that we teach you in this chapter really ultimately aren't that useful. So what you'll notice is there are very few chapters where the only thing I'm focused on is what you might see on the test. Normally I want you to really understand the idea behind the thing. There's no idea here. There's no point other than don't miss these questions on the test. I can tell you exactly how many questions. 2. This is 2 questions. I just don't know what to. Anything that I put a definition or a picture of up is fair game. Most likely, those are the only things you have to worry about. There are things in the book in chapter 16 that will not be on my slides. My experience is you don't need to know them. Okay? I can't make that guarantee, but what I can guarantee you is that you do need to know the ones that I have on these slides, because there's going to be 2 questions from it. The good news is it's just straight memorization. There's no thinking involved with it. It's just vocabulary. Do you know these things? Okay? And so basically all we're doing here is going through for vocabulary purposes. So, starting from lowest and working our way up. And remember, this is just residential construction. This is not commercial construction. This is just residential. So starting from the lowest point of construction, we have the footings. Footings are the only part of the construction that is below ground. And think of your feet. Where are your feet? They are your lowest part of your construction, and so are they for a house. Generally speaking, the footings have to be buried below the frost line. So that means in different parts of the country, are the footings going to have to be deeper? Absolutely. If you're building a house in Michigan, for example, the footings are going to be much deeper than they would be in North Carolina, which is one of the reasons why you see basements are so much more common in areas that are further north from us, because they already have to dig much deeper just to pour the footings. And if you're digging that far down, you may as well go ahead and make it a what? A basement. You may as well make it useful. In North Carolina, we don't have to go very deep for the footings. What is it, 18 inches? 12 inches. 12 inches is the frost line. See, I knew he would know. Yeah, you don't have to know that. But that's why you don't see as many basements in North Carolina, because it's a big additional expense, because it's just not necessary. That and the fact that, generally speaking, if you dig an 8-foot or 9-foot deep hole in North Carolina, you got a swimming pool, not a basement. You know, the water table is pretty high in a lot of North Carolina, so it's hard to keep it from flooding. So the footers are the lowest part of the construction. The foundation walls sit on top of the footings. So you pour the footings first, and then they come back and they build the foundation walls. Now the foundation walls are usually brick or cinder block. Sometimes they're poured concrete. You know, they'll set up frames and pour concrete and then remove the frames. But most often they're going to be made out of brick or cinder block for the foundation walls. And that's a good image of foundation walls there. You can see the footers underneath. That's down here, right there. And then the foundation wall is built on top of it. Everybody okay with that?
What's that heater thing?
I don't know what that is. You know, yeah, I think the construction crew was having a cookout. You know, or maybe it was cold out there. I don't know. Here's the thing that I find most interesting about this. Why is the air conditioning unit already sitting out there and the house is not built yet? That one I cannot figure out about this. It's got to be an addition, right? It's got to be an addition, and there's a house up there somewhere. That's the only thing I can think of. Because I looked at this and I was like, why is the air conditioner there already? But that's still a good image of foundation walls. They've been putting it in the ceiling. I don't know. Piers. Piers are underneath the house. They are between the foundation walls. See, if you go back to this picture, here's the problem with this image. If you were to try to build a floor span that goes all the way from this wall to this wall, your floors are going to be very springy and they're going to sag. Does that make sense? Because there's no support between here and here. If the floor is just sitting here and then sitting here, there's nothing to support it in this middle section. Does that make sense? And if you've ever been in a house that didn't have adequate support on the floor, have you ever been in one that felt like you're walking on a trampoline, right? Or you walk across the floor and you can hear the china cabinet vibrating as you go across, or you feel like you're like, ooh, you know, like back and forth? That's a house where it doesn't have adequate piers. The piers are these vertical columns that you would see underneath the house, but between the crawl space walls. Here's how I always remember. This was my trick years and years and years ago for remembering what piers were. I think of a fishing pier down at the coast, because the visual image in my mind of a fishing pier is the vertical posts that hold it up. And so if I think of a fishing pier, I immediately think of the posts coming up, and those are the posts underneath the house. Everybody okay with that? Again, just vocabulary. You don't need to, you don't need to have a deeper understanding, just vocabulary and know where it's located. 3 different types of foundations in North Carolina. One is by far the most common, the crawl space. Crawl space, by far, most common foundation type in North Carolina. There's a few reasons it's the most common foundation type. It's cheaper to build than a basement. And generally speaking, it's more convenient and desirable than a slab. And we'll talk about a slab in just a second. I'll come back and make the comparisons here. But this is by far the most common type of foundation that you would find in North Carolina. And we call it a crawl space because it is a space underneath the living area but elevated off the ground, and it's usually crawling height. There are some that are stand-up crawl spaces, but they're rare. Most of the time they're crawling height or lay on the ground and walla height, depending on how tight they are when you get under there. And keep in mind, as a real estate broker, every house you sell, you're expected to get in the crawl space and check it out. So just remember that. No, I mean get in. I mean bring your coveralls with you and get in and go underneath there and see what's going on. The spiders and snakes ain't gonna bother you. No, look under there. Look under there. Look under. You can't fit. I fit. If I fit, you do. I do keep a pair of coveralls in the car because on occasion I do go in a crawl space at an inspection, depending on what they find or that sort of thing. A lot of the inspectors now carry them with them in case the buyer's there and the buyer wants to go in the crawl space. They keep extra pairs of coveralls with them. It's always funny watching somebody get offered coveralls. You want to come with me? And they're like, do I have to? No, you don't have to. Don't have to. Basements, least common foundation type in North Carolina because they're the most expensive to build. They are by far the most expensive to build. They're also the most convenient from the standpoint of they provide extra storage space if they're unfinished, and of course they could provide extra living area if they're finished. Generally speaking, with basements in North Carolina, we don't have very many true basements. We have daylight basements, which means they might have 1 or 2 or 3 sides underground, but at least one side is exposed to the open air. Whereas in the north, you get mostly true basements. You go to Michigan, you want to see the weirdest thing. They call them bunker houses. These are people who started building a house. Well, of course, the first thing you have to build is the basement because you have to start from the basement. And they ran out of money, so they never built a house on top of it. They just put a flat roof, even with the ground, and they live in the basement. There's no house there. You drive in the driveway, and there's just a concrete slab with a roof over it. They're very common. They're very common in northern parts of Michigan, yeah. Like the Upper Peninsula and places like that. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. It looks like a bomb shelter is what it well, that's what it looks like, is a big bomb shelter, And the idea was, as they got the money, they would come back and build a house on top of it, and then they never got the money, so they just lived down in the ground. Or didn't want to spend it. They were content living below the ground, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not coming over to your house if you live in a bomb shelter. I'm not coming to see you. This is their front door, Yeah, no thanks. And then increasing in popularity in North Carolina is the slab foundation. Slabs are increasing in popularity for one reason. They are cheaper. They are the cheapest form of foundation to construct and the quickest because it's over in a day. They come, they dig it, they pour it, that's it. But the builder's not concerned about your plumbing issue because they're long gone, right? And that is the biggest problem with a slab foundation, is you're very locked into that floor plan and what's there. I love this HGTV revolution. Everybody thinks they can renovate their house. And they come in and they say, well, I want to move this bathroom from over here to over here, and they got a slab house. Yeah, good luck. Good luck. Bring in a jackhammer and a truck and start jackhammering out concrete because all that plumbing is inside of that concrete.
It's those people with those huge budgets that don't do anything. Those ones like,
oh yeah, right.
Have a butt collector, and she's a stay-at-home mom. They have a budget of $3.4 million.
Right, exactly.
Professional kayakers,
Yes, exactly. And they have a budget of
$82,000 on this job.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. But that's a slab foundation with its obvious drawbacks. Now, one of the things that agents, it's crazy to me, but a lot of agents struggle with identifying whether it's a slab foundation or a crawl space. You know, and that's a material fact. You need to be disclosing it. Here's my trick. I'm not going to laugh at you if you struggle with it. Yes, I am, but I won't do it in front of you. Here's my trick. If you go upstairs to get in the house, it's probably a crawl space. If the front door is level with the driveway, it's probably a slab. You know? You ever been in somebody's garage and the garage door's right there and there's no steps up to the house? That's a slab. Everything's on the same level. But if you gotta go up 3 or 4 steps to get in, that's a crawl space. Now that's not 100% guaranteed to work, but it's pretty dang close. So also, if you can see exposed vents of any type, that's a crawl space. Okay, we good on those? Everybody good on the 3 different types of foundations? Now, these are words you might see on a test as well. These are the floor structures, the wood components of the floors. You should know the sill, S-I-L-L. The sill, or as most North Carolinians say, the seal. The seal. I got a rotten seal. I was like, well, why'd you kill him? You know, the sill is the lowest piece of wood in the property. At some point, you've got to change over from the foundation wall, which is concrete, to wood. That's the sill. It's going to be that piece of wood that sits on top of the foundation wall and attaches the rest of the house to it. This is, for obvious reasons, the most prone to rot piece of wood in the property because it is the lowest, so it's going to be the most exposed to water, and it's sitting on top of concrete. So if water gets on top of the concrete, it sits there against the wood, it causes it to rot. And so one of the common things you would find in inspections of houses that have some age on them is a rotten sill. If they have French doors, you can count on a rotten sill. I've got them right now in my house. My house was built in 1979. I dread ripping them out because I know it's got to be rotten because every set ever made has leaked. Every one. You ever found one that didn't leak? They all do. Y'all know what French doors are, right? Except for the ones you installed? Yeah, right. Yeah. French doors are the double glass doors that fold and meet each other in the middle. Yeah. That everybody loves. They leak. They leak. If they're exposed to weather. Somebody said, well, mine don't leak. They're on my screen porch. I'm like, yeah, I guess not. Right? But if they're exposed to weather, they generally leak. And the problem is, they leak where you can't see them. They don't leak on top of the floor. They leak and it runs under, and you get a rotten sill down here at the bottom. At the band, yeah, the front band gets rotten. Yes, ma'am.
Are we looking at the foundation?
This is the foundation.
Gotcha. And that's the crawl space door.
This would be a crawl space door, or it could be a basement door, depending on. I can't really tell from this picture. Pretty. It looks like a what?
It looks like a roof.
No, this is not the roof. This is
There might be, 2 to 3 foot high.
right. It could be based on perspective. It's hard to tell if that's a basement or a crawl space, but this would be the foundation, and here's the very bottom of the house, right? And then these are the floor structures that are turned up on its edge, right?
Talking about the floor part in my brain.
This is floors. Now, these are called floor joists. The floor joists are the wood. Joists always run this way, whether they're in the ceiling or whether they're in the floor. So you have ceiling joists above your head and floor joists below your feet. Joists are the pieces of wood that give structure to the floor. So you think about it, you've got your floors and you got plywood. Well, what's holding the plywood up are the floor joists. You got your ceiling, which is sheetrock or gypsum board or whatever you want to call it, drywall. And what's holding that in place are ceiling joists. Does that make sense for everybody? So joists are always either just below or just above the living area. And then it's just another picture that shows you a breakdown of the flooring pieces. So this would show you, for example, where a pier is sitting underneath the floor. It shows you a girder. The girders go underneath the joists. and then the joists sit on top of the girders. So working your way up from the ground, you'd have pier, girder, joist. The girders run the opposite direction of the joists, so they support them. Think about Lincoln logs. You ever had Lincoln logs, right? With Lincoln logs, you know how you don't stack them all on top of each other, you crisscross them, right? Same thing here. Your floor joists are all running one direction, so you want a girder that goes the opposite direction underneath them to give them support, so they don't bug. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. That's what the floor looks like. And of course, the plywood or particle board that's on top of all that is your subflooring. So that's what subflooring would be right below your hardwood floors, your carpet. That's what you would see if you ripped the carpet up, would be the subflooring. They set it on a slab. You rip the carpet up, you're looking at concrete. That's exactly right. You don't have subflooring on a slab. And that's why slabs are cheap to build, because not only from a foundational aspect are they cheap, but all of this goes away in a slab foundation. You don't have it. You don't have to worry about any of that. All of this is gone in a slab, because in the slab, your floor is the foundation. It's concrete. So they literally just roll carpet out on top of the concrete. Welcome home. Welcome home. Yep. It's just like in here. The same thing as in here, right? This is concrete right under this. Just vinyl on top of concrete.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense in like an office setting, I guess, but
It's just cheaper. I mean, see, that's-
Slab homes, same way.
That's why people
well,
do it.
okay, then what about like if they can slab homes be 2 floors?
Yes.
So then
Second floor would be wood. No, second floor would be wood. Once you start working up, you build it like any other house.
okay.
It's just everything from the floor down is concrete. Then,
So when you get those, I'm sure everybody's been in an older house that feels like you're walking on these planks that are like kind of uneven. You hear a squeak, one comes up, one comes down. Is that just the subflooring that needs to be adjusted, or is that?
it's probably the joists are moving.
Joists?
Probably the joists are moving.
It's probably pretty expensive to do though, isn't it?
It depends on what the issue is ultimately. I mean, if
Staircases are really common.
it really depends on what the issue is. It can be related to a lot of things. Sometimes the joists were just spaced too far apart. Sometimes they used 2x6s when they should have used 2x8s. Sometimes they didn't put enough girders in place. So it can, like for example, my house, I had really springy floors across my living room, and then I brought a grand piano and put in there. And so when we first moved in, and my dad came in, he said, we need to do something about that. So what we did is we went under and we put a couple of piers, and we put one girder that went underneath the floor. So you had the floor joist running this direction. We put one girder down the middle with piers under it. And it took all the spring out of that floor. So sometimes it's just the original way it was constructed and age. Sometimes things have settled. I've been under houses where you see, for example, the piers have settled so much that the floor is no longer sitting on the piers. It's literally sitting there levitating above. The pier has sunk that much. And so those are kinds of things that can be corrected. That's what Ramjack's in business for. Not that I recommend Ramjack, I'm just saying that companies like that. Okay? Wall framing. Some terminology you might see for wall frames. Studs are the vertical pieces of wood inside the wall that give it its structure. Right? So most of you have tried to hang pictures on the wall and missed the stud before, right? And have hung it on the sheetrock and found out an hour later when it comes crashing down that that's not a good idea. But the studs are the vertical, they're usually 16 inches apart, 16-inch centers in the walls. You should also know what a header is. A header is above any door or window. And here's the reason for it. It's designed to support this weight. Because if you didn't have this header here, there would be nothing to hold this section of the wall up. Does that make sense? So what the header does is it takes this weight and transfers it out to the sides. That's all it does. So you see headers above windows, doors, doorways, anywhere there's an opening in a wall, you would see a header. Top plate, sole plate. Where's the sole of your shoe? At the bottom. So the bottom of a wall is the sole plate. The top of a wall is the top plate. And walls are usually built laying on the ground, by the way. Builders are not acrobats. They lay them down on the subfloor, build them, and then sit them up in place.
I'm working out at a new Tryon development, 80 homes in Tryon, Lake Forest. And those guys out there, they're building houses, the framers are doing, man, they're getting things up. And, they did a whole first floor in like 4 hours.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I was watching it.
It's amazing how fast they can. How fast they can throw it up.
They're almost all spin walls up there.
So, are we good on these terminologies for the wall stuff? Roof components. So we kind of, again, ground up, working our way up. When you get to the roof, we said we had ceiling joists. Remember, the floor joists are just below the floor, and the ceiling joists are just above the ceiling, right? But you also have something called rafters. The rafters are the angled parts of the roof. So when you look at a roof from the outside, if you're looking at a roof from inside the house, you're looking at the joists. If you look at a roof from the outside, the shape you see are the rafters. The rafters give the roof its shape on the outside. That's what sloped so water and snow can run off the roof. The overhang of the roof, if you think about a roof, roofs almost never just stop at the exterior wall. They usually overhang it by some distance. That overhang is called an eave. So wherever the roof overhangs the outside wall, when you go home today, look at the outside wall of your house, and I guarantee you the roof does not stop at the outside wall. It overhangs it. There's a soffit, and that's called the eave that overhangs the outside wall. Okay? And this is just breakdown of the eave. Again, I recommend you go through and look at this. The ones I've highlighted here are the ones that you're likely to see on the test. You don't have to worry about any of these up here, but the fascia board or fascia, how am I supposed to say that? Fascia. The fascia board is the front board right behind the gutter, and the soffit is the part that you see if you stand under the overhang. The flat part above your head is called the soffit. And yes, all these are fair game terminologies on the exam.
Wait, say what the soffit is?
The soffit, so if you're standing outside the house, this is looking outside the house. This is the overhang of the roof right here. So you got shingles coming down, right? You get to the edge of the roof, here's your gutter. This overhang area right here, the whole thing is the eave. The underneath part is the soffit. So the part you're looking up at, when you go, if you go stand right next to the house and look straight up and see the bottom of the overhang, that's the soffit. That is the soffit. Most common type of roof in North Carolina is the gable roof. That's about the only shape roof you need to be able to identify on the exam, a gable roof. That normal A-frame roof that you are so accustomed to seeing in North Carolina is called a gable roof. There are lots of other shapes. You could have hipped roofs and Tudor-style roofs, and there are other types, but by far, like 98% of the time in North Carolina, it's a gable roof. And they can go in multiple angles, and when they go in multiple angles, that's just called a reverse gable. You know, one direction going into another. But if it has that very notable A shape, that's a gable roof. Slope is how steep the roof is. When you talk about a roof slope, you're just talking about how steep the incline is. The more steep, the better for shedding water off. Generally speaking, the more steep a roof is, the longer the roof will last. The harder it is to work on,
More expensive.
more expensive to replace. And then some window components. The only thing I really imagine you would see about windows are identified here. The sash. The sash is the part of the window that moves. The window sash is the whole section that moves in one piece. A single hung window is one where only the bottom comes up. A double hung window is one where the bottom comes up and the top comes down. Most older windows are double hung windows. Most newer windows are single hung windows, generally speaking. Double hung windows are significantly more expensive than single hung windows. Because in a single hung window, this top sash doesn't move, so there's a lot less involved with manufacturing it because it's always in place. Obviously that makes it a lot harder to clean, for one thing, because if you can't pull it down, you can't reach it. That also makes it harder to ventilate the house, because technically speaking, if you want airflow to the house, it's more effective to lower the top sash than to raise the bottom sash. But you can only lower the top sash if it's a double hung window. And then this word, star that word, a muntin, because I guarantee you have no idea what it is. And you might see it. That's the tic-tac-toe board. The divisions inside the window, the grates inside the window, that divided into individual panes, those are called muntins.
Hashtag.
Yep, hashtag. Buttons. You should know what HVAC stands for: heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Heating, ventilation, air conditioning is HVAC. And in North Carolina, the most common type of HVAC system is the heat pump. Heat pumps are by far the most common heating and cooling system in North Carolina. The thing that makes them unique is they use the same system for heating and for cooling. You are heating with your air conditioner if you have a heat pump. They are very efficient. They are not very warm. It's the best way to describe them. Now, in an area that has access to natural gas, the most common is going to be a furnace. You're going to see a combination air conditioning furnace or gas pack. Exactly. Generally, you see heat pumps wherever there's not access to natural gas because it's much more efficient than a propane furnace would be. Propane is very expensive. Very. And last thing, if you want to be Bud and become a general contractor, then he doesn't advise it. Then you need to go get a general contractor's license. You just need to know the rule for you folks. In general, in North Carolina, if you are contracting to do any amount of work that's less than $30,000, you're considered a handyman and you don't need a license for that. If you're doing anything that's contracted more than $30,000, you need a general contractor's license.
Per job?
Per job. Per job. And you cannot intentionally break a job up into structured quotes to avoid the limit. You can't do a $50,000 kitchen renovation for somebody and structure it into, two $25,000 separate invoices to avoid the $30,000 requirement. Now, I don't know how they police it, I don't know how they catch it, but that's what the law is. And that's it for chapter 16. Y'all have a wonderful week. Look at that. A little bit early. That never happens.
There you go. Who's buying? It's a real question.